him. Now that Lauren Mekis is in charge, they have a man with an engineering background as their team principal who probably better understands the engineering demands of what his drivers are telling him than Christian Horner did, who was a racing driver in his career. And I think that Mekis Verstappen partnership took a huge step forward as well. And the team principal kind of went into bat with the engineers and said, look, I know your simulations say one thing, but I think we can make this work with what Max is saying. So let's give it a go. And to me, there was a lot of hope for Red Bull for the future out of this, and the future this season too. And that, maybe Max now has, not that he didn't have faith beforehand, but a lot of faith in Lauren Mekis, that he's a team principal that will listen to what he's saying. And he's been very critical of this car. 12 months ago, this was a monster of a car, and not in a good way. Scary closet monster that's going to keep you up in the middle of the night. But, together they might now forge a very good partnership for Red Bull, where Max feels he's being listened to, and we might see a little bit more of this. And isn't that great for the rest of this season as well? We've got a title battle. Max is probably out of that title battle. He's just under 4 wins behind, but he might be able to get in amongst the McLaren drivers and really cause problems for the papaya rules, or the Lando Oscar dominance. We'll see at tracks that are more suited to the McLaren car. But I think this is absolutely fascinating going forward now.
Careful, because Monza is such an outlier in terms of car wing setup, car setup. So we can't read too much into the performance of that now for going forward for these other tracks. But nevertheless, what I also heard that Laurent, being an engineer, actually had an impact now on this decision that Max was able to make, because he was as the most senior person in the room with the engineering competence, was seeing this dynamic of the engineers seeing their simulation number and Max wanting to go a different route, and in the end called the shot and said, let's go with Max's feeling out there, and gave him the freedom, to go down his route, which proved to be right. So it was an example of where Laurent really had a first really big impact on actual performance and winning a race together as a team.
Are you both saying that didn't happen then under Christian? Surely,
I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I think Lauren has got the expertise, the background, and the knowledge to have that conversation with the engineers, and the engineers then respect Laurent's views, because Christian, for all his strengths, isn't an engineer. And I think sometimes you need someone, when you're having that engineering conversation, your senior person, if they understand all the engineering principles, is going to be able to call the shot, in Max's favor this time, and not say, well, actually, Max, the engineers probably know a bit better. Let's go with them. I'm not saying that happened before, but it definitely didn't happen this time around.
Yeah, no criticism, of course, to Christian, who's been an awesome leader and one of the greatest we've seen in our sport. It's just that in this particular case, Laurent's experience worked to his favor as a leader, in this example.
Yeah, I mean, Callum Nicholas, actually, he said it on this podcast, how great Max is with feedback to the engineers and understanding the impact it's going to have around the car. And actually, when I talked to GP at the beginning of this year, I mean, that was one of the things that kind of it stood out for him right from the start, was just the way that he was, he's got so much capacity, hasn't he, Nico, that it's spare capacity when he's driving. We see it so often. That they almost have to rein him in, but with feedback, he's almost peerless in that front as well. He's got so much experience, and he can talk like an engineer to the engineers, like you did a little bit. That was one of your strengths, right?
It was, yes. And I also like to hear how Crofty, who lives right on Cranfield Airport and has learned to identify the loud noise from Max Verstappen's airplane. And Crofty has confirmed that Max Verstappen is very often at the Red Bull headquarters, and very often, therefore, also in the simulator So also a bit of a learning for me today how that he's really
adding to the team's points haul alongside Verstappen's victory. Pushed on how important it was for his drivers and the team to avoid errors should Red Bull continue to pose more of a challenge. Stella responded, "When you race in Formula One, when you race at the top of Formula One, and like I said before, the competition is so tight, simply you cannot afford errors in any case, because there will be your contenders that are ready to take advantage." And this before might have been Mercedes, like in Canada, Max, like at the start of the season. We don't have to forget that Red Bull won the 2 races at the start of the season, in Suzuka and Imola. And then, if anything, they kind of slipped back in terms of performance. And now they seem like they found their way back. But they were in contention for victories already at the start of the season. For us, considering especially the Drivers' Championship, certainly the margins to error reduce furthermore. But this is always the ethos when you're racing in Formula One. Hopefully, some of the inaccuracies and issues have accumulated in this weekend. Because in this weekend, we have to remember that not only we didn't have a fast enough car, but we also had some reliability issues that cost Oscar some time during practice. Therefore, quite a lot to take away for the drivers, but also for the team. Stella backs up capital yes comments on Verstappen's title chances, as he stresses McLaren drivers cannot afford errors. With Max Verstappen adding to his tally of wins in Azerbaijan, McLaren boss Andrea Stella believes that the Red Bull driver remains a serious contender for the Drivers' Championship. Andrea Stella has reiterated his belief that Max Verstappen is definitely in contention for the driver's title following the Dutchman's back-to-back victories in Monza and Baku, with the McLaren boss admitting that his drivers cannot afford errors as they battle against the 4-time world champion. After Verstappen clinched a commanding pole last time out at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, Stella answered a firm yes when asked if he believed that the Red Bull driver was a serious contender for the crown. The Italian also emphasizing that his response to the question should be written in capitals. With Verstappen then going on to triumph in Sunday's race at the Baku City Circuit, on a weekend that proved more challenging for McLaren, Stella referred back to his comments as he reflected on the 28-year-old's title prospects. I used the capital letters already. We're talking about Max Verstappen. We're talking